Greetings, fellow Earthlings. My name is Zach.
And I'm Jessica.
And this is
High Level Hairesy.
Question everything. Without the question, how can you have the answer? Wisdom comes from within. This is High Level Hairesy.
Zach, did you know that we didn't actually go to the moon?
What? You're crazy. If that's what they told us, it must be true. In today's episode, fear. Is your life a lie? The what and why of conspiracy theories.
But before we dig into it, let's take our breath together so we can get on the same wavelength and you can just come into the moment. So I will say, inhale, that will be your 1. Then I'll count you down. We'll hold a breath at the top and then we'll exhale. And if you can, if you're anywhere that you could sigh it out, Zach, give us an example. Then go ahead and sigh it out on number 4. Here we go. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. All right. So today's question, is your life a lie, actually comes from my dad's booklet that he wrote over 20 years ago. I think it's been about 23 years now that he wrote this. It's called Fear, Is Your Life a Lie? And we're actually in the process of publishing this book. And hopefully by the time this episode airs, it will be drops, whatever. We will be able to have this available to you on the website, www.highlevel444.com. If not, it will be coming soon. So I am going to read a little excerpt from his book, but just a little background. Like 20-something years ago, he was telling us some of these things to kind of wake us up to the fact that our life isn't as it seems, that there have been things that have been manipulated. And I always just kind of like, okay, Dad, okay, like, and viewed him as a conspiracy theory mountain hippie. And one of the things that he had come up with for hippie was happy, intelligent people pursuing infinite enlightenment. And, you know, I like that. I want to be a happy, intelligent person pursuing infinite enlightenment. So I'll be a hippie any day. So just to also offer a little disclaimer, we're not here to preach. We're just here to explore and some of the things that resonate with us, and that some of these things have actually been verified. So we'll kind of go into some of that a little bit later on, you know, going into what is a conspiracy theory and the whys behind some of them. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from this. You say, what? My life is not a lie. I have a great life, good job, wonderful children. I'm pretty healthy and I have lots of trinkets, toys, and a home. I say to you, all soon to pass away, to be lost or rusted or maybe stolen. So if all you've been taught outside of your own insight or by trial and error has been a lie, i.e. history in general, if your so-called religion is a lie or at least has also been manipulated for fear, control, and greed, if you have been led by wolves in sheep's clothing, led to believe lies by MSM, manipulators steering masses, then perhaps you are living a lie. You know the saying, ignorance is bliss. Just because you are not aware of something or have been lied to does not mean it cannot hurt you or cause you great loss. Acting like an ostrich, sticking your head in the sand, does not seem too smart either. I wonder how many of those big birds have had their butts ate off by predators. Many good-hearted people will be going into shock as they start to awaken to what our government has been up to, let alone religion, for the most part, has been used for greed and control, rather than opening up simple spiritual truths that would bring healing to each of us and the planet. The elitists, however, will not allow that. They prefer to keep all the sheeples in line and dumb down. With their agenda of control, our enlightenment is their worst nightmare and will be hampered at all cost, including war, poisons in our water and foodstuffs, fear, and more fear. According to them, pandemics aren't a problem. They use our own tax dollars to finance big pharmaceuticals and use media to spread fear. They own Hollywood, news, mainstream media, and about anything needed to keep the masses deluded. So,
False evidence appearing real.
fear. So that's just a little excerpt and kind of gives you a little bit of it's only 24 pages, but gives you a taste of some of what you're in for today, but also what's in his book that, he had told me about fluoride in the water, and I kind of put it aside. I'm like, I'm not too bougie that I can't drink tap water, Dad. And then a couple years later, got some insight when I was going within, and I kind of felt guided to stop drinking tap water. And then, lo and behold, wasn't it this past year that they started talking about fluoride in the water.
Yeah, a lot of stuff started to come out that, like, the conspiracy theory, the truther community has been talking about for 30, 40 years. People have been talking about this stuff, chemtrails, all that kind of stuff. That's all come out in the last, 2 or 3 years. But yes, just last year.
And there's some states that have actually started defluoridating the water.
Yeah, there's various states that have started doing it, but there's a bunch of different municipal water supplies around the country that have started to just stop fluoridating their water. So yeah, that's come out recently.
And another little excerpt from a book that I'd like to read that predates by a couple centuries is from The Age of Reason, Thomas Paine. He's talking, just to give a little nutshell, this is in the first page of his book. He's talking about that his intention was to write about this stuff and religion and his thoughts upon that at the end of his life. But he was like, but what's going on right now in 1796? He wanted to get to it quicker. And he said, I should make to my fellow citizens of all nations, and that at a time when the purity of the motive that induced me to it could not admit of a question, even by those who might disapprove the work. He says, the circumstance that has now taken place in France of the total abolition of the whole national order of priesthood and of everything appertaining to compulsive systems of religion and compulsive articles of faith has not only precipitated my intention, but rendered a work of this kind exceedingly necessary, lest in the general wreck of superstition, of false systems of government and false theology, we lose sight of morality, of humanity, and of the theology that is true. So all we're doing is digging for some truth. And this is some of what we found. So Zach, can you tell us what even is a conspiracy theory?
Gladly. A good definition. A conspiracy theory is an alternative explanation attributing major events to secret coordinated actions by small groups or powerful groups or whatever, often when the official story feels too inconvenient or incomplete. That is a formal definition, but really, simply put, it's really conspiracy is just a legal term. In the court of law, it's a conspiracy is when like 2 or 3 or more people conspire to do something. I mean, so that could be any group of people. That could be our government. You know what I mean? So
Could
that's
be
more
our
than
government.
just
Gooberment.
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 But so basically, conspiracy theory, it's an alternative explanation for something. And typically it's an alternative explanation for something that is doesn't make any sense.
And didn't that term conspiracy theory, wasn't that coined by the CIA?
Yes. It's coined by the CIA and Mossad together in the 60s after the JFK assassination. So they did it in order to discredit anyone who questioned the official narrative, because people started noticing, like back then, even with that kind of footage and everything, the laundry list of inconsistencies, to the point that they felt the need to insert that new term into our lexicon. It obviously worked well, because, at this point, anytime that term is used, most people immediately think of, where's your tinfoil hat, or, that dude's crazy. So
put on your tinfoil hats, guys.
Yep, their mission absolutely was accomplished. So yes, that term was coined by our government and other governments as well in response to the JFK assassination. So to speak a little bit further about conspiracy theories and conspiratorial thinking, in the medical journal Current Directions in Psychological Science, they said humans evolved to detect patterns, even false patterns, because missing a predator was deadlier than assuming one. This hyper-agency detection fuels conspiratorial thinking. So that's a little small reason why a lot of people think like that. Not everybody, but a lot of people. The European Journal of Social Psychology in 2017 said that conspiracy thinking spikes during times of uncertainty, trauma, or rapid societal change.
Well, and I think it's because we're trying to make sense of things that make no sense.
Exactly.
And then when you start digging, I mean, they call it a rabbit hole, because once you start going into something and you are truth seeking, and I'm going to say, I've said this quote before and I'll probably say it again. The only difference between a conspiracy and theory and the truth is about 30 days. And it's as you begin going down and looking into things, it just leads you further and further, because things unravel, and the stories that we've been told, it begins to make even less sense. And a lot of times these things are to promote mainly fear-based feelings and emotions, because when we are afraid, the collective consciousness, where attention goes, energy flows, and then we continue to produce more of the same, more division, more fear, and we're distracted from trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can be.
Harvesting that loosh. Which that fear and everything is, that's all loosh, and
Can you give an explanation of loosh? Because
it's just energy.
Okay, it's another word for energy. So just like anything, in extreme, there's a balance, a healthy skepticism. You can go very far in the other end where you're like hyper vigilant and everything under the sun is something else. And honestly, when you kind of dig into it, it is. But my dad always said, play attention. Like, pay attention, still play, still have fun, still create your own reality and draw to you the things that you want, but pay attention. So play attention. There's a scripture in Proverbs 18:13 that says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. So another thing that Plato said, We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy is when men are afraid of the light. And conspiracies often begin where light is missing. And so really it's just kind of taking a story that you've been told and shining some light on it instead of staying in the dark and just taking what you're spoon-fed. So let's talk about some of the reasons why people get drawn into conspiracies in the first place, like the psychology and the appeal, which earlier we said, you know, making sense of something that, like, how can this happen? Or why? Why would they lie? Why would they do that?
Right. And like I also said, that quote from that psychology journal, that specifically it spikes, that kind of thinking spikes during times of rapid societal change, trauma, uncertainty. But rapid societal change is what I'm really pointing at right now. And that's why, just look at our world. I mean, you could go further back than this, but I'm just going to keep it simple. Look at our world in the last 5 to 6 years, basically since 2020. Things have been rapid societal change in just 5 or 6 years. So, absolutely. And you mix that, the rapid societal change and all of that, you mix that with the dissemination of information now and how quickly information just in a snap, something happens on the other side of the world. And then within minutes, people on the other side of the world are hearing about it and they're reading about it or they're seeing it. And that kind of, which then leads into the conversation of censorship and why they would want to censor all of that kind of thing, because they don't want us communicating. They don't want us, because then you see the real thing. We're not just relying on the radio or the TV and the news anchors on the TV that, our grandparents
don't rely on the news anchors.
No.
There's footage out there that shows news anchors from all over the nation literally repeating the same script word for word.
Yeah, major news organizations all the way down to your local news stations. They are all given the same exact scripts with slight variations. And
for the locale.
Right, for the locale, and to make it sound, but it's
and they're all owned by the same people, by the way.
Right.
At the top.
Oh yeah, there's only less than a handful of companies that own all of the media, meaning TV, news, print, online, newspapers, everything, all these media.
It's called television for a reason. It's right in
I've also heard
it's right in front of us.
Vision.
Real eyes, real lies. Oh, that's actually from Sean Hibbler Productions. He's a chap that we've gotten down on some of his
I'd love to have him
documentaries
on the podcast one day.
We will.
He'd be awesome. He's only up in Chicago, so he's not far from us.
Sean, if you're listening, hit us
I'm going
up.
to tag you in all of this stuff. So anyways, back to what we were saying, it's not our grandparents' world anymore, where, back then there was only a handful. They didn't have cable or anything like that back then. They had a few different channels. And so everybody got their information from basically the same sources, the same newspapers, the same news stations, the radio, and people believed everything they were told, like hook, line, and sinker, down to the point where, if you remember, well, I don't think any of us would actually remember, but if you've read about it or heard about it, when the radio broadcast, back when people used to gather around the radio in their home and listen to, before TV was big, when War of the Worlds came out on the radio, people thought that was actually happening. Have you ever looked into that before? It's very interesting how, and it's just the early days of media. So of course people had not been given any reason to distrust any of it at that point. So they took it, as absolute truth. And
just like Plato's allegory of the cave that we mentioned in episode 3.
Right.
And I mean, that goes along.
That's exactly it. And they thought it was real, and people legitimately started losing their minds because they thought that the War of the Worlds broadcast, which was the book by, I'm forgetting the name of H.G. Wells, the famous author. it was a book by him, and they were reading it, and they had all the like they had different like sound effects and stuff in the background while they were and people thought it was real. So, anyways, my point is that's not the world we live in today, and that's why all of these different alternative media outlets, news outlets, and everything like that exist. Investigative journalists, because people are like, that's what journalism is supposed to do: is just report the facts and the truth with no bias,
No
no
censorship.
censorship, and you know. I'm not claiming support for anybody, but our boy in the White House, when he used to say fake news, I mean, I used to laugh at that. And then the more now you look back on it and you're like, I mean, he's not wrong when he calls those, all the different media outlets fake news. I mean, it really is fake news.
Listen, it's all fake news because
it's all fake.
all
It's
that
all
is
theater.
two wings of the same bird.
Right. And we can talk about that at some point as well, but that's all politics is, y'all. It's two wings on the same bird. They all suck.
So another reason why people are drawn into conspiracies is because it offers a sense of identity. Like a lot of people, there's ego involved in that sometimes, like, oh, I'm in the know. Like
Humans
you
are
don't
tribal.
know, I'm in the know, and you should listen. And often my dad, he had a little bit of an ego at times and said, oh, that's too deep for you. Or, oh, I've been talking about this stuff for 20 plus years. And so, so there's some people that, truth seeking or not, it offers a sense of identity. And that's another appeal to why some people, might be into getting into those. And then it also offers a scapegoat, someone to blame when the world makes no sense, as we mentioned, like brings order to the chaos. Sometimes you can present facts to a person, and just because it messes with their paradigm and makes them feel uncomfortable, they don't even want to look at it. And that's okay. We're not here to sound the alarm and wake you up if you're not ready. But it is just, it's just a call to like, dig a little deeper and maybe question if something niggles at you, to say, I wonder what that is, instead of just disregarding it. So there are actual verifiable historical conspiracies. We're going to go over a few of those. We're going to let Zach, this is where Zach really shines, all the detailed information. He's been, I call him an undercover investigative journalist. He listens to all the alternative media that, as he mentioned earlier, presents the facts, and there's no censorship. And that is something that you have to do, is you have to look at your sources. You're not just going to go and, oh, this lady at work said this, and that's hearsay. And so don't take our word for it, just question yourself. But Zach, why don't you can you go into a few of the verified conspiracy theories?
Yes, these were things that I would say were conspiracy theories, and then they were verified by our own government.
So yeah, I guess they're verifiable truths at this point. They've crossed from a conspiracy to truth.
Right. Or no, they've crossed from a theory to a truth, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I'm just going to briefly, because we'll go more in depth about some of the bigger ones later, but these are just some good examples. So I will quickly go over some of the verifiable conspiracy theories, things that have been admitted at this point. So we'll start off with COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was basically just a FBI program that targeted, U.S. citizens. So that term is short for counterintelligence program. So it was basically just a bunch of covert and often illegal operations run by the FBI. They say from 1956 to 1971. However, it is still in use today. So it was designed to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt American citizens, but what they would call domestic political organizations or individuals perceived as threats to national security, which
like activists, and things like
activists, yes,
people who were trying to get the word out.
correct. And it's always, and like I just said, perceived as threats to national security or the social order.
Oh, to the establishment.
Yes, but the security is what
Mm.
there's always it's always in the name of something else. So it's always in the name of peace and safety that they start to implement more and more draconian laws and things like that. There's always a reason, quote unquote, and security and safety are always typically one of the number one reasons that they're like, oh, well, we have to start doing this. Patriot Act is a very, very good example of essentially it was just modern day COINTELPRO, which, like I said, they say they quit doing it in the 70s, but that's not true. So, yeah, so that's one that has been.
Well, can you give an example of, or like go into a little bit more detail about the Patriot Act?
Oh, the Patriot Act. Okay, so the Patriot Act's a really good example of COINTELPRO, like I just said. So the Patriot Act was enacted after 9/11. 9/11 brought in quite a few laws and ways of doing things in the name of national security that we all just see as normal today. Like TSA didn't exist before 9/11, which I'm not saying TSA is bad or anything. Clearly, I don't want people, getting on there with a weapon of some sort. I don't think it's a bad thing, but things like TSA and stuff like that are because of 9/11. But the Patriot Act, really what that did was it made it legal for our government to spy on us. And they've been doing it ever since.
And it's invasive.
Very invasive. They can, wiretaps, tapping your phones, tapping all that. And now today with smart technology,
we joke about it, but
we all know it's real. It's a joke at this point because so many people it's funny because it's true. And that's why,
you have to laugh to keep from crying.
Right. Whenever you bring up like, oh man, our phones are listening to us, everybody laughs because they know it's true.
I mean, come on, you've seen it in your algorithm.
It happens on every one of you listening that has any kind of social media or doesn't even, or just YouTube even. Like you talk about something, you have a conversation or something, then the next day or maybe even later on that same day, you start seeing ads or stuff like that or pages that have to do with what you were talking about. And sometimes it's incredibly specific, as if it were tailored for just you. Anywho, so Patriot Act was a very good example of what COINTELPRO was, which, by the way, that it's verifiable because in the Church Committee reports in 1975, 1976, the U.S. Senate admitted that this was an FBI program targeting U.S. citizens. So that's verifiable. Next one, similar, MK Ultra. A lot of people know what that is. Some people don't. But MK Ultra, MK stands for mind control, but it was like the German spelling. So that was a CIA mind control experiment that, again, they said they quit doing it in like the 60s, but there's numerous examples today that MK Ultra clearly still is happening.
With that, they utilized LSD.
Yes,
right?
They utilized LSD in the beginning of the experiments. And
there's also like hypnosis involved, which one word can trigger.
Yes. So a lot of it, they utilize trauma. They utilize various different drugs to kind of brainwash people, essentially. But yes, MK Ultra was a program that, according to them, was from 1953 to like the early 70s, I think, authorized by the CIA director, Alan Dulles, back then. And they had a chemist, Sidney Gottlieb, I think was his name. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Where they wanted to try to develop mind control techniques, truth serums, like sodium pentothal. There's a scene in, was it Meet the Parents or Meet the Fockers, where he injects him with some stuff.
Truth serum.
That's sodium pentothal. That stems from the MK Ultra stuff. Anyways, behavioral modification tools, all that kind of stuff. So basically, they utilized LSD, which guess who supplied the LSD?
Who?
Eli Lilly.
Oh.
There were a bunch of different sub projects within this whole thing that involved all these different universities, hospitals, prisons, and they would basically covertly dose people with LSD. So they would give it to them without telling them.
Can you imagine?
Mm. Dude, that would be terrifying if you had something like that.
If you went into it with no intention.
Oh, God. And so they would do that. And then while the person was under that influence of LSD or whatever else they were using, they would then use hypnosis and electroshock and sleep deprivation, isolation, psychological torture, all that stuff while you're on that. And
makes me want to crawl out of my skin just thinking about it.
It also wasn't just US. They also did this to a bunch of Canadians as well. So the Canadians felt this too. So this is all verifiable. I'm telling you right now.
Declassified CIA documents.
Here, I'll just read you just a very, very, very brief little thing, and then I'll tell you where I got that information from. So agents lured people to what they called safe houses in San Francisco and New York, dosed them with LSD via prostitutes. So they used honeypots.
Oh, gosh.
And then they would observe the reactions through one-way mirrors, so that they could then also have blackmail on these people. The experiments caused hallucinations, paranoia, and deaths, like an Army scientist named Frank Olson, who jumped from a hotel window in 1953 after unwitting LSD exposure. His family later alleged that it was murder. And I do think it was murder by the government. But in Montreal in Canada, the psychiatrist Ewan Cameron subjected mental patients to what he called psychic driving with repeated audio loops, drugs, and comas, erasing memories and causing permanent damage. Volunteers like Ken Kesey, who's the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then Whitey Bulger also participated, who is a big mafia guy. But a lot of their tests targeted prisoners, addicts, and the mentally ill. So the goals included creating Manchurian candidates for assassinations. Oh, what have we been having going on a lot lately is assassinations or attempts by Manchurian candidates, discrediting people via induced aberrations, and exploring hypnosis for espionage. Do you know where I got that little excerpt from? Intelligence.senate.gov. That's directly from the government's website.
So, I mean, there is a plethora of declassified CIA documents that you can go and check out and look at. I mean, so much different information.
So that was my source from just that little bit. But the original admission from the government came from that same church committee reports that when we were talking about COINTELPRO earlier. Congress admitted in the church committee report, and all the CIA documents were declassified. So that verifiable. So those are just a couple of examples. There's plenty more that you can look up into. You just have to do a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, but you
don't have to dig very far either if you're not into digging, and you don't want to get your hands too dirty.
And that's the thing, is that a lot of these things, especially if it's coming from the government or, some major corporation, they count on people not going and digging. That's why you can find a lot of this stuff if you just dig far enough. Literally directly from intelligencesenate.gov. That's crazy, man. So,
well, and it makes you understand why people don't always trust the official narrative.
Right.
1 Thessalonians 5:21 says to test everything, hold fast to what is good. So it kind of blesses the idea of questioning without endorsing paranoia. And so it also says, take what resonates with you and leave the rest.
Right.
Hold fast to what is good.
And in doing what we're doing right now, in doing what maybe you will do after listening to some of this, you'll start to see patterns. That's the other thing too, is that it's not just that you have to know about every little thing that's going on all the time and what's really going on and blah, 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 blah. What it is pattern recognition. So once you start to look at these things, especially when you can have some that are like verifiable, like what we just read off, then that starts to give it more credence to your brain, to where it's like, okay, all right, well, if this isn't true, then what else isn't true? And then you go find that other thing that, oh my gosh, that was totally a lie that we were told. And then you start to see more and more and more. And then you start realizing, okay, this is all actually what these conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat guys were saying is true. Now, okay, who's going to go first, you or me? Because I don't want you to lose your thought.
Thank you. So I know when I say this, you're going to want to go off the rails on this as well. But one of the patterns is problem, reaction, solution. So you say, why this? Why the lie? Why this? Because it creates a problem. We have the reaction, and then they bring in the solution, which usually the solution is, what they want, as AKA the Patriot Act. And then another thing that I just wanted, didn't you test? You were going to go into the military, some branch of the service.
The
Navy. So years ago, Zach looked into going into the Navy, and he actually tested like really high in recognizing patterns. So there is something to his brain in all this, and like probably the drive and finding the truth. And the truth shall set you free. But okay, go on. Go ahead.
I'll really quick to what you just said. And you'll hear me say this a lot. You'll hear us say this a lot throughout our show anytime, especially when we talk about things like this. But the problem, reaction, solution, that's the playbook. I'm telling you, every single time, that is the playbook. So that is the technical term for that is the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic was a philosophy from this dude named this German guy, I think, Hegel. I can't remember how you pronounce it. Hegel. But it is the formal way of saying problem, reaction, solution is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So the thesis is the initial concept. That's the problem. The antithesis is the contradictory or opposing idea that negates the original thesis. And then the synthesis is the solution. That's where they create that the answer to whatever problem they just created. So that's basically, that's the playbook. I'm telling you guys all right now, that's the playbook every time. And the more that you see all this stuff, the more you're going to be able to recognize that. And then you'll be able to tell sometimes without doing any kind of research, because you just know from what you just saw and heard, like, okay, and the question you always have to ask yourself too, especially on the world stage, what am I being distracted from? What are because it's always like, there's so many times where I'm like, okay, is it distracting me from this, or is it distracting me from that? It's kind of like hey,
don't look behind the curtain.
Look over here. Yeah, don't look at the man behind the curtain, or hey, trying to get your attention. Hey, look
the
over here.
The great and powerful Oz.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into why these stories stick, and what other effects that these kinds of things have once the solution has been offered. I think there's a lot of collective trauma involved.
Yes. So when you watch violent or catastrophic events on TV or social media, it can produce trauma-like responses in the viewers. When a population watches tragedy unfold on live TV or social media, the nervous system doesn't distinguish between witnessing and experiencing. For example, after 9/11, repeated media viewing correlated with higher PTSD-like symptoms, even in people nowhere near New York City.
Hmm.
Yeah, collective trauma, that fuels distrust, fear, and alternative meaning seeking. And trauma imprinting creates heightened vigilance. And they also know that, a fear-based collective consciousness, we're all watching something that happens. A recent example, the Charlie Kirk assassination. They didn't censor any of that footage and allowed it to be viewed by everyone all over the world. When in the past have you ever seen anything like that? And immediately, fortunately, I did not watch that footage and was very careful to not let my eyes, heart, and mind see that. I personally believe that it was done on purpose to keep the population in fear and a state of lower vibration, because where attention goes, energy flows. As we said earlier, if it created division, it created fear. I read several comments on social media that said, I've watched this like 5 times and I got physically ill. First of all, why would you do that to yourself? But second, sorry, no judgment there, but I guess I would not want that. And that sticks. And like I said earlier, our nervous system, our brain doesn't recognize experiencing and witnessing. And when we are in a constant state, collectively continuing to create more fear, that just perpetuates the division and we're distracted. So that's one reason that these stories stick around.
They want us to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, like, just real quick, because how often, like, there's so many things that are censored on social media, like little things, piddly things
that they're completely scrubbed from the internet. And
Yeah,
then this
there's
was
little
something
things,
that was just
but then
watch
here's-
this
yeah,
and watch the woman that was killed.
the lady that was stabbed on the bus or the train or whatever. I think the train. Yeah, like that, or that dude that killed that CEO of United Healthcare. They just let that float around everywhere, and like,
And then here we all are. Oh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And that is what it looks like. But that's because we're not focused on, as cliche as it sounds, being the change. We're focused on the trauma that we're being shown. Studies after 9/11, Sandy Hook and George Floyd showed spikes in collective cortisol levels, anxiety and distrust.
Yeah, and to add to the cortisol thing, when you have spiked continual heightened cortisol levels, that affects your immune system.
And then now I feel depressed. Here's
a pill for
Here's
every
a
ill.
pill for every ill. Collective trauma also helps predict increased belief in alternative explanations. So then you've got all kinds of things going on. Everybody's saying something else, and there's mass confusion.
That's the other thing too, is they want confusion too. So they're not, there's going to be, okay. So this gets into kind of the conversation. I know you don't like this term, but it's a real term, a limited hangout. A limited hangout is where so you have three different things. One of them's the truth, of what actually happened. And then the other two arguments are basically theories or ideas of what happened or why something happened, but neither of them have anything to do with the actual truth. So then you get people fighting between those two things that are inconsequential. So this leads to that, because the confusion is what I'm essentially saying, is they have you fighting over something that means nothing, all the while the truth is over here. So it's a distraction to cause confusion, because then you don't know whether you're coming or going, which is exactly where they want you to be.
And what is it? 90% lie, 10% truth. Give just a little bit of the truth. So
No,
have
it's the other way around. 90% truth, 10% lie.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. because they give you a bunch of truth and then they sneak in a little bit of a lie.
No, I feel
That's
like
what hooks people, is that truth.
okay. So there's enough to
So
hang
there's
your hat on, but it's not the
but
full
it's not
story.
the full story. Exactly.
All right. So
Exactly.
forgive me. That's why we have two people, so that we can verify, and I'm not just out here spitting random stuff.
Attention Earth humans, this is not a drill. Your haircut has entered a danger zone. At High Level Design Salon and Barbershop, they specialize in emergency-style corrections, precision fades, cosmic color, beard work calibrated to NASA level standards. Because honestly, your current look is drifting off course. Zach and Jessica turn the mundane into magic with results that are truly out of this world. Book your glow up before re-entry of highlevel444.com. That's highlevel444.com for services, pricing, and appointments. High Level Design Salon and Barbershop. Houston, we fixed it.
You know, scripturally, Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge."
I love that verse.
And kind of just shows that misinformation and incomplete narratives are a fertile ground for confusion. And, you know, this is saying like, hey, don't be afraid to search, because you make sure you find the truth so you can properly navigate this world.
Yes. Which, again, we've talked about this before on the show, as well as just between you and I, as far as staying up on things. You do have to be careful. You don't want it to consume your life or consume your emotions or anything like that. You can't become emotionally invested in some of this stuff. You know, I've talked about that before, is that learning what we're learning and seeing the pattern and seeing how it happens, so then you can recognize it, so that then you can maybe find the truth, so that then you can properly navigate this world and the way that it works. And it will only behoove you to do that. And, you know, I think so. I really like that. I've said that. I've quoted that scripture multiple times on here because I love it.
And the difference between Zach and I, he loves to be in the know. And I kind of got to the point, I'm an empath, and I got to the point where it did affect me, and it affected me in a negative way to be up on everything that was going on. And that is not to say sticking your head in the sand. It's to say, I'm going to put my energies, if I'm supposed to be involved in any number of these things, I truly 100% believe that it will be brought to my attention that I need to be involved in this. Otherwise, right now, my energies and my attention are going to uplift myself and others, to be a guide for my kids, to be a teacher to them, to help them learn to co-create their world. So, you know, and that's not to say like, don't pay any attention, but just be careful what you're looking into and how much you're giving, because there's proof out there. We can't go into all of it today, but there is proof that the majority of these events, including recent events, are orchestrated and manipulated for a particular narrative.
That's what I was going to say earlier. You just reminded me of what I forgot I was going to say. An agenda.
An agenda. There is an agenda.
A narrative, an agenda that they want to push.
And actually, there's a little part in my dad's book that it's called The Great Illusion, that he didn't write, but he included. It's actually, nobody knows who wrote it. So just a little teaser for you to see some of what the agenda actually is. And the in a nutshell, to keep us dumbed down to the fact that we are powerful. Because if we all believe, we stand together and we believe that we have the power to make changes instead of hiding out in our house because we're afraid, then what?
There's more of us than there are of them.
United we stand, divided we fall. So, okay, let's have a little fun and talk about some of the big ones, the conspiracies that everyone's heard about, and good places to start if you want to do a little digging yourself and become, as we like to call, a truther. Zach, I'm going to let you go into a few of these. Let's start with 9/11.
That's the big one. That's I've talked about that before in here too, that was kind of my big one.
An inside job.
Yep. We all know 9/11 was an inside job. So
that was your catalyst to start.
That was my catalyst to start really. That's when I first started noticing things.
Asking questions.
I was in 7th grade. Watched it happen. The
Just
collective
a wee
trauma.
Babe. I think, a freshman or sophomore in college.
Like, I remember sitting in my class and my teacher was in tears. And we did, like, none of us understood why at first. So anyways, yes, this was my catalyst. In the truther community, the conspiracy theory community, 9/11 is always like a really big one that gets brought up. These are some of your basics. These are some like real big ones that everybody knows about, that these are just good catalysts if you want to start diving into them.
Give the bullet points of like the core conspiracy angles.
Yeah. So 9/11, September 11th, 2001. We are told the official story is that 19 hijackers aligned with Al-Qaeda carried out coordinated attacks with box cutters.
Wow.
Man. And, everything burned and crashed and everything, but somehow they found all their passports on the ground. Huh. Weird.
Odd.
So that's the official story in a nutshell, is that a couple of planes hit the Twin Towers, and then you had another one that crashed into the Pentagon, and you had another one that crashed into some field in Pennsylvania.
I would like to just give a quick little disclaimer for all of these, that we are not saying that there wasn't real collateral damage that happened, that people didn't really lose their lives, and that people didn't lose loved ones. That happened, and that does happen story after story, because they don't care, and it's a part of pushing the agenda. Continue, Zach.
Okay, so another term for everything that we're talking about, false flags. So you'll hear that term get thrown around from time to time. A false flag does not mean that it's something that didn't happen, or that people didn't die or get hurt or anything like that. It means that it happened, but it's not what we are told happened. And false flag is like, it's a way for them to, their agenda, their narrative, to be able to enforce something. So yes, that is a good preface. We are not insinuating at all that people were not harmed or that people weren't killed. Because to the controllers, the elite of the world, that's just collateral damage. They don't care. So 9/11, let's just start with some of the obvious. I'm going to start with a couple of the obvious ones that I noticed as a child. The Pentagon. Where's that plane? Go watch any footage of that wreckage of right after it happened. There is no plane whatsoever. Planes don't disappear. They don't disintegrate when they crash. That was the initial thing that even as a 13-year-old kid was like, I was like, man, where's that plane at? Same thing with the field in Pennsylvania where supposedly, there was no plane there either. That was clearly a missile, something like that. The Pentagon was definitely a missile. If you're able to find that CCTV footage, there's like and supposedly all the cameras weren't working that day except for one. There's one, and it's real hard to find that footage, but that footage clearly shows whatever hit the Pentagon, which clearly was a missile or something, was flying way too low to the ground for it to be a plane. So anyways, that's a first very easy one to just look at the footage and be like, okay, where's that at? Also, side note, the day before 9/11 on September 10th, Donald Rumsfeld announced that the Pentagon could not account for $2.3 trillion in spending. So guess where that spot is that got hit at the Pentagon? That was the financial area where they kept all of those records. So weird little coincidence. Doesn't prove anything,
Seems
but I
a
think
little
it's
sus.
odd. It seems a little sus. So anyways, that's a really good place to start as far as showing you just like, dude, there ain't something right here. Watch the footage of the towers coming down. That is obviously controlled demolition. The way that they came down.
Implodes. It doesn't explode.
Right. And you can look up at this point, all these years later, 25 years later. Oh my God, it's the 25th anniversary this year. Demolition experts, people that have been in that industry their entire lives, will all tell you that was a controlled demolition. So just watch that footage. Again, it's not hard. Watch it and see, like, dude, that thing. And then let's not even, Building 7 down the street, a smaller building, like multiple blocks down the street. How did that come down? There wasn't even a plane that hit it. They said it was because of falling debris and it floated however many blocks down the road. So that's another one too. But like I said, controlled demolition experts from all over the world have verified that those were very obviously controlled demolitions.
Wasn't there some financial oddities too?
There were. That was going to be my next point. So financial oddities, if you look into, what was his name? Larry Silverstein, I think was his name. I might be getting that name wrong. He owned the buildings and he happened to take out a massive insurance policy, like not that long before 9/11. And there's also some weird things with him being in debt and stuff like that. And this kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about with the Titanic later. That it was, there was stock puts. They did a lot of shorting. If you look at what the stock market right before 9/11 happened, there was a lot of shorts and stock puts that happened, right? Which basically is where people in the know sell off a bunch of stuff right before an event happens, and then they make a buttload of money. Or vice versa, they buy up a bunch of stuff, you know what I mean? That's super cheap or whatever, and then it shoots up right after that event. So financial oddities, you can look all of that stuff up with the owner of the buildings and all that stuff.
Follow the money trail, dude.
Yep.
That in anything.
So like I said, with that, there was just a lot of unusual market activity in the days leading up to September 11th. And that's straight out of some of that information I got straight out of the Journal of Business. Like I already mentioned, Donald Rumsfeld the day before, he claimed that they couldn't track $2.3 trillion in transactions. And then 9/11 happened the following day. So weird. Yeah, it was Larry Silverstein. Sorry, I was looking through my notes and I had the name right. So he signed a 99-year lease for the World Trade Center on July 24th of 2001, just 6 weeks before the 9/11 attacks. The lease required him to obtain insurance, which included coverage for terrorism. In 2007, the disputes were resolved through a series of settlements.
What a lucky insurance policy that was.
Yep. Also, Larry, who typically, I did look into this too, Larry was typically at the towers. When he was in New York City at home, he was typically working. Like, he would actually go into work. He would go, even though he owned the place. But he was weirdly absent on 9/11 due to a lucky dermatologist appointment. That has been confirmed by Silverstein himself in interviews as an unfortunate coincidence. And as such an evidence is not evidence of a conspiracy, is what he specifically said. What an odd thing to say.
That's, yeah. Did we ask you?
I didn't say it was a conspiracy. Why did you just say it was not evidence? Anyways, also stand down accusations from NORAD, which is our North American defense system, whatever. They basically were told to stand down. Oh, that's why nothing happened.
There was no defense.
There was no defense because they were told to stand down. Supposedly there was intelligence warnings beforehand that something was going to happen, and it was ignored. The last thing I'll bring up about 9/11. All right, guys. Jet fuel cannot melt steel beams. Okay, it's simple.
Science.
It's science. So I'm going to give you the melting point of steel is anywhere from 2,500 to 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Jet fuel's ambient burning temperature is almost 1,900 degrees Fahrenheit. That's at least 500 degrees discrepancy there, if not more. So physically, from a physical standpoint, jet fuel does not burn hot enough to melt steel beams. So that alone tears apart the entire thing. That both of those buildings came down and blah blah blah. There were explosives planted all throughout that basement and all throughout that building. I'm not going to go into that, but there's evidence of all of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That includes another country that I won't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You want to go into the next one?
Yeah, let's talk about the patriarch of American conspiracies.
And what do you guys think that is? I'm going to let you guess. Okay. All right. Yep, you're right. The JFK assassination. Okay. I think this was also one of the first times that we as a society experienced collective trauma. Because not the first, but one of the first, because this was in the earlier days of news broadcasting and stuff like that, to where everybody saw this. So there's something to be said about that. But the official story is that there was a lone gunman. We all know his name, Lee Harvey Oswald. You can even just go into his history and see he's got a spotty history. And the official story came from the Warren Commission in 1964, which, the Warren Commission. Does that mean, I'm pretty sure that means the government was investigating itself. So same thing with 9/11.
Isn't that always how it is? It's the government investigating the government.
Yeah, the 9/11 Commission. That was a whole thing, and they basically just were like, "Yep, this wasn't a hoax. This was real. This had nothing to do with us." You know what I mean? So that's the government investigating itself. So of course they're going to say it was a lone gunman. And if you know anything about the JFK assassination, there were multiple bullet holes that came from different directions. Just where they told us on the grassy knoll that he was at the book depository or whatever, doesn't make any sense from where the entry wound and the exit wound and all that stuff was. So none of that makes sense. And if you can find the legitimate footage from when that happened, and it's hard to find that now because a lot of the stuff's been scrubbed, but if you can find it, you can very clearly see it's the driver that did it. The guy driving was the one who did it. You can see he very, very quickly over his, I can't remember, I think it was his right shoulder, over his right shoulder has a gun, and then bam. And go ahead.
Well, there's reasons. I mean, go into the reasons as to why he was killed in the first place.
Which, by the way, that was totally on me. I didn't say anything about the reason for why 9/11 happened. I can give you a real simple answer. That was our excuse to go over into Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and start a pointless 20-year war. Because war is money. All wars are bankers' wars. That's a good quote that you should always remember. They control both sides. They fund both sides of every war, and they make massive amounts of money. These defense contractors, all of that. So that's why we also wanted to control oil and the production of heroin and stuff like that in Afghanistan, excuse me. So that's just a brief. That was 9/11, and it was also the excuse to implement things like the Patriot Act. So that's a quick
reaction
solution. And so the problem was terrorists and terrorism, and the solution, we got everybody, collective trauma. And then remember how patriotic we all were when that happened. And we were like,
"Your guys, don't worry, we'll protect you."
Yep. And then we can, and then solution is, okay, Patriot Act, spy on our own citizens and go start a massive war for no reason. So that was 9/11, JFK assassination, the reasons behind it. So, there's also other theories concerning, CIA was involved, which absolutely they were. And actually, for some reason, people don't remember this, but a few years ago, literally 3 or 4 years ago, maybe, it came out that the CIA was involved in Kennedy's assassination. In the news.
I was going to say that actually
and
has
it's
been
it got buried or people
over.
Just didn't care. I think it's because
paying attention.
Nobody cared. And if that had come out in the news 20 years ago, that would have been the top news story of the week, you know? So anyways, all right. So there were reasonings for, you know, JFK's assassination. I don't necessarily think it was, the reasonings behind this were not necessarily to implement a whole lot. It was to get rid of things this time around. So this wasn't trying to, there are not really a whole lot of laws that I'm aware of that they were trying to implement from this assassination. They were trying to get rid of people and or ideologies, things like that. So JFK, this is the big one. And most of these are multifaceted because they're never going to let a good tragedy go to waste. Mm-hmm. So it's never just one reason. Mm-hmm. They're going to kill multiple birds with one stone kind of thing. But a big reason with JFK is he would not allow Israel to acquire nuclear weapons. That's not really one that's talked about a lot, but if you dig into this, that was a huge reason. It's not the only reason, but it was a big reason. He insisted on mandatory periodic U.S. inspections of their Dimona nuclear reactor, which is a modern-day nuclear reactor. That was a facility built with French assistance that U.S. intelligence suspected was intended for plutonium production. Kennedy insisted on biannual unlimited access inspections by U.S. scientists to all of the sites at the Israel Dimona complex. The Israeli government, however, engaged in a systematic campaign of deception to hide the military dimension of its program. They were disguising it as, oh, it's just energy. It's just for this. No, it wasn't just for that. It wasn't energy production. It was for like nuclear weapons. So they created fake control rooms and rehearsed with their scientists to fool the American inspectors, who operated under the false assumption that no plutonium reprocessing plant even existed. So the outgoing Eisenhower administration actually confronted Israel about this construction going on and were told that it was for a new, quote unquote, textile factory. And then Lyndon Johnson orchestrated the power grab once Kennedy was killed. So real quick, I'll go into just the other aspect of the JFK assassination. Money, which it typically always comes back to money with almost all of what we're talking about. Money.
It's all about the Benjamins.
The love of money is the root of all evil. So we are seeing that as we talk more and more about this. So money is the other big part of JFK. He had been working on, he had actually created an executive order 1110 that
ones and zeros,
that said, basically took away power from the Federal Reserve. He was attempting to create like a newer currency that was like fully backed by gold and silver and precious metals, and if I'm not mistaken, was debt free, which is also very similar to, if you want to, on your own, go look up the Lincoln assassination, the same exact thing. He created the greenbacks. That was a debt-free, currency, and the bankers and all those guys, the elites of the world, did not like that. So JFK essentially did the same thing, created an executive order that would have taken away a bunch of power from the Federal Reserve. He also was calling out organizations like the CIA. He was calling out things. He also had some disclosure information that they did not want disclosed, i.e. extraterrestrial type stuff.
And the Federal Reserve
is not a federal organization. The Federal Reserve, that's a whole nother conversation, which also ties into the Titanic, by the way. These all connect. There's a reason for all of these. So basically, the Federal Reserve was created, the modern day that we know, Federal Reserve is our central bank. It was created in 1913, I believe. They called it the Federal Reserve on purpose so that the general public would think that it was a governmental organization. It is not. It is as federal as FedEx, which is not at all. It is a private bank that controls our entire money supply. That is how the majority of the major countries in the world, not all of them, but a lot of them, operate through the central banking system. That's a very dangerous thing to do. There was various different presidents and founding fathers and early people in our country's history that knew how dangerous that was to put the entire supply of money and control of money into a very small group of people's hands, a private bank.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, JFK was railing against that. He was railing against the CIA. He actually had advocated of completely abolishing the CIA because he knew what kind of stuff they were behind. So not only was he affecting their money, but he was also affecting their power. He was trying to take away power from the Federal Reserve and from some of these 3-letter agencies. And they took him out for it. And an odd thing real quick is that, do you know when Lyndon Johnson, his vice president, obviously he became president immediately right after JFK was assassinated. Do you know what his first official act as president was?
To dismantle what JFK
had
put into.
The very first official act after he got sworn in, I think he did this on Air Force One, if I'm not mistaken. He rescinded that Executive Order 1110 that would have taken power away from the Federal Reserve and gotten rid of it. So I think it's odd that I'm like, why was it that important that that's the first official act that you did was to completely just undo what Kennedy did?
Mm-hmm.
So there's your Kennedy story. And by the way, sources for the official findings, yet again, Warren Commission report, government investigating itself. And then the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded a probable conspiracy, but with insufficient specifics. Again, House Select Committee on Assassination. Again, government investigating itself. So there's your JFK.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that you can go look up as well.
And let's fast forward to a little more recently.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Bryant.
Oh man, that was a sad day. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember standing in our kitchen and hearing. Actually, you know who it was? Pat McAfee. I saw something randomly that morning, like right after Kobe died, and it hadn't really hit the news yet. And Pat McAfee, because I used to work with Pat McAfee. I used to do his hair. I was his barber for a little bit. Pat, if you're listening, hope you're doing well. He had posted something out of nowhere, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically I remember thinking like, okay, I thought he was making a comparison between Kobe and LeBron with whatever this post was. And then I realized, I was like, oh my God, I think Kobe just died. And then like 10 minutes later, my phone started blowing up with, news outlets saying that, Kobe Bryant dead from a helicopter crash. That was terrible. I loved Kobe. So anyways, Kobe, very sad. Him and his beautiful daughter, Gia, I believe, they were on the way to him and his daughter, and then a teammate and that teammate's dad or mom, I can't remember. They were on the way to a basketball competition. Gia played basketball. So they were on the way to one of her competitions, and helicopter crashed out of nowhere and died. Fun fact, there was no smoke, by the way, where he died, which was a weird thing. The official story is that it was pilot error because of foggy conditions. There was no mechanical failure found, according to the official findings from the NTSB final report in 2021. So here's the true or the facts behind it. So
some of the facts behind it and what he was into.
Yeah. All you have to do is just look into Kobe and what he was doing around that time. So there were some issues with the pharmaceutical industry. There were some disputes. There was lawsuits involving Kobe's name and the company High Tech Pharmaceuticals. And he was just in the middle of multiple lawsuits against some of these major corporate pharmaceutical companies. So that's one behind it too, is that he was causing some big issues and hitting some wallets.
And wasn't he knew Dr. Sebi, or he was about to bring out information about Dr. Sebi, who had cures for literally whatever ailed you. He was healing people naturally.
Yes. He was, like I said, he was poking Big Pharma for other reasons with lawsuits, which is very similar to what Dr. Sebi did. And if you guys don't know who Dr. Sebi is, he was a doctor from New York, I think. Holistic doctor. He was a holistic doctor that had cured thousands of people of most major illnesses. I mean, I'm talking HIV, AIDS, cancer, arthritis, all these different diseases or, ailments that supposedly we don't have cures for. And that's another conversation too. Dr. Sebi had some weird things surrounding his death because, again, he was threatening the pockets and the wallets of Big Pharma, of the, or as we like to call it, pharmaceuticals.
He was actually originally from Honduras.
Was it Honduras? Okay,
yeah.
But he lived in New York or something, right? Okay,
Just
I was wrong. So I was wrong. He lived in New York, but he was originally from Honduras. Okay, so Kobe was poking Big Pharma with lawsuits, just like Dr. Sebi, and there's some various other theories too concerning like the helicopter itself, and but really the big thing was that Kobe was speaking out. Another thing to add to that real quick that I actually found out years later is Kobe was in talks with China to create an entire new basketball league to rival the NBA. This isn't talked about much, but that was I truly believe that was part of this too, is because that was going to be a major blow to some pocketbooks.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, Kobe, arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time, behind Michael Jordan.
I was wondering if you'd say that.
No, Kobe was Michael Jordan Jr. By the way, just look at him playing. So anyways, he was in talks with China, and I believe that was, they wanted to create a huge rival league, and NBA didn't like that. So I believe that was a big part of it as well. Yeah, I think those are kind of the big reasons. It's money. It comes down to money.
A few more just to breeze through, not go too into depth.
These are some to just kind of, you can go check them out for yourself, and they're iconic, yes, stuff that we all know of, but go look into them yourselves. And you know what? If you feel like emailing us or anything like that with your ideas or your theories, or if there's something we haven't brought up today, that'd be cool. Maybe we'll bring it up in a future episode or something like that. So go ahead, Jessica.
Well, the moon landing hoax, since we brought it up in the very beginning.
Oh, I love talking about
the claims are that NASA staged Apollo 11 to beat the USSR.
The space race.
So we wanted to hurry up and get up there and put our flag on the moon. And, they said they had lunar samples and all that jazz. But it's very interesting that we haven't gone back since then. And NASA claims it's because they lost the technology.
That's a quote. It's a quote, by the way, from a NASA scientist that said, "We lost the technology." That's like verbatim what he said.
Yeah. And every other aspect of tech has progressed, but that one hasn't. And I always question, how did the camera and film survive space? Did they leave the cameraman there when the footage showed the lunar module leaving the moon? And then we watched, again, Hibbler Productions kind of debunks the claim that we went. And there's an interview with Buzz Aldrin, who supposedly went to the moon. And it's an 8-year-old girl. And she asks him, why haven't we been back to the moon? And he's much older at this point. And he kind of falters for a minute, and he stops, and in a moment of conscience,
or Freudian slip,
he says, well, because we didn't go. And I watched it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's right there. And then Buzz did an interview with Conan O'Brien where he said broadcasters used animation to supplement live footage of the landing.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another example where the guy with the Bible came up to him and said, just put your hand on the Bible and say we went to the moon. And
He wouldn't do it.
he would not do it. And didn't he?
He physically assaulted that
the
guy.
guy?
I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a well-known like investigative journalist, and that's all he did. He just said, "Here's a bite." I will say, he was kind of harassing him a little, not in a bad way, but he was like following him around in public and was like, hey, with a camera, and was like, "Hey,
Just give me the truth, man.
just dude, if you
Swear
went,
on God
just
and-
here's a Bible, put your
Mhm.
right hand on the Bible, and say and Buzz's face, his eyes, like he saw red. He was enraged."
And you can find this footage. You can watch it. You can find the documentary on Hibbler Productions. Then to glaze through a few more Roswell and UFO cover-ups. Now those are now legitimized. Like that used to be like, oh no, that's not true. That's silly. That's crazy. It's now legitimized by the Pentagon UAP disclosures between 2020 and 2023. I was mind blown that nobody really gave two shits about any of that. It just was like, hey guys, yes, this is real. Oh, nobody cares.
Yeah, they tried to tell us it was weather balloons.
And those are from the UAP task force reports.
Yes, and I remember at our old house too. Again, not only the Pentagon, but Israel, their former like defense minister or something like that, came out on like the news and multiple different articles. I remember sitting reading. He came out and was like, "This stuff's all real. They've been here for a long time, and they are involved with all of the top government officials of the world."
Mm.
That was the former Israeli defense minister.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just some random dude. And funny thing, I haven't heard much from that guy since then. I don't know if he's been suicided or if he's just not talking much or if they scared him or something, but he hasn't said much since then. And I remember thinking when I read that, I was like, this is like one of the first times I've ever read like a top official, a government official admitting this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody cared.
Right.
Like nobody talked about it. I waited to see it work with my clients. If anybody would talk about it, nobody ever brought it up.
Mm.
I brought it up a few times. And then every time that I did, I'd be like, "Did you hear about this?" And they'd be like, "No, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's crazy. It wasn't like top of the news cycle." Anyways.
I actually was like putting flags in my yard and be like, "Come on, I'm here. Like, come say hi." I've always been down with the ET.
Get in, loser. Hey, by the way, as far as NASA and all that stuff goes, just a fun fact. Do you guys know what the word NASA means in Hebrew?
Tell me.
It means to deceive.
Mm.
Just
Look
so
it
you
up.
know. Yeah, look it up.
So also Epstein, even getting more recent, there was confirmed criminal networks and mysterious death when he was in custody. That is a conspiracy powder keg that we won't go down, but
The cameras just happen to be not working. Oh, just like the Pentagon.
mm-hmm.
It's always the same story. The closed circuit TVs or cameras always seem to be like when Princess Diana.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one too. All the closed circuit cameras magically weren't working that day.
Mm-hmm.
So that always is something that I've noticed in these things too.
And then just something very quickly that I'd like to bring up because it holds a special place in my heart. Michael Jackson's, that whole thing and his guilt and what the lies they made up about him.
It was a smear campaign.
It was a smear
Huge.
campaign because Michael Jackson owned the controlling share of Sony's catalog. Okay. So when they don't like that, and if you can smear someone's name and make people not like you anymore, I can't. We're going to do an episode on Michael Jackson and all that. I'm very excited about that one. But anyway, so why do some of these conspiracies spread and others die, do you think? Why do you think, like...
Why do they die? Oh, why do some of them spread and why do some of them die? Well, my initial answer was going to be, I think some of them die because it gets buried.
Mm.
You know, there's a lot of things that you used to be able to find on the internet that you can't find anymore. Stuff is getting stuff is, that gets into the whole dead internet theory that like everything's getting scrubbed.
Well, I mean, I have a a hearsay personal example. My good friend, one of my besties, she was telling me back, it was like in between 2020 and 23 when all that disclosure stuff was coming out. She was on TikTok and there were tons of people and information, people saying they were getting downloads and having like experiences with ET. And she said she went back to look for it and could not find any of them. It had been completely scrubbed. So censorship and them being buried, I believe, is one reason why, or it just seems so outlandish that it's like, you can't even fathom why that they would go to this extent. And so you just like scrub it from your own mind.
That's why the whole TikTok thing went down the way that it did. It had nothing to do with national security, guys. Come on.
No, the U.S. got a hold of it and said
they wanted control of it so
it.
that they could control it, because at the time before it was sold to the U.S. and by extension Israel as well, they had no control over it because it was based in China, and and they just blamed it on national security. But obviously we see now with that story is a perfect example that there was all this stuff coming out. Man, we're not even on TikTok. And I've seen a bunch of videos that, my buddies have sent me and stuff, and the kind of videos that would be on there, it felt like it was just, there were so many times I'm like, how is this allowed? Like, because I knew it was telling some truthful things, and then bam, now all that stuff's gone.
Mm-hmm. So navigating conspiracy culture without losing your mind. Like we said earlier, find the balance between healthy skepticism and falling into rabbit holes. Now, not all rabbit holes are bad. It's the tunnel that you start going down and you're like, oh my gosh, this leads me to this and this to this. But watch out for red flags, unfalsifiable claims, moving goalposts, single source theories. One person said this and it can't be backed. You have to cross-check your sources and understand like the cognitive biases. I always pause on that word because anyway. So, Zach, can you mention like one or two of the uncensored, like alternative media sources that you get a lot of your information from?
Yes. One big one is as far as just news goes, news outlets. If you're just looking for straight news, RT News is really good. And don't let that trigger any of you, because a lot of people hear RT News was kind of demonized a little bit because people felt like it was pro-Russia or something like that. It's not. It's just uncensored news. And the only reason it got demonized is because RT News was one of the few news outlets that was coming out and reporting what was actually going on in Ukraine and Russia when that all started, which, by the way, that started 4 years ago.
Wow.
It's been 4 years since that stuff happened. That stuff started. So anyways, RT News is a very good place to start. They have very unbiased, uncensored news, if that's what you're looking for. So RT News is a very good one. There is, there's another channel. If you go on Telegram is a good app to get because as it stands, it's still not censored right now. I can't speak for the future, but as it stands, it's one of the few platforms that doesn't really censor and allows various alternative news outlets, investigative journalists to have a voice and not be censored. So a couple of channels on there, just right off the bat. There's one called disclose.tv. I believe they're based out of Germany, but it is fully like English and everything. It's not like it's in German or anything. That one is a very good, they just kind of report what goes on. And they kind of dig out things that are real things, but like aren't talked about in the mainstream news sometimes. And also just the real take on whatever's going on in the mainstream. So disclose.tv is a really good one. There is another one called the Vigilant Fox. They have grown quite a bit over the last few years. They, again, just kind of unbiased news reporting, a lot of investigative journalism, a lot of independent journalists, boots on the ground type reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a few good ones, just a few good places to start. I'm not going to sit here and list off a bunch of different ones, but
yeah,
those are some good places to start. Like I said, you're not going to be able to find, I would not recommend any of the major news outlets. Now, it's okay to keep an eye on it. Sometimes I'll keep an eye on some of the major ones like CNN, Fox News, all that kind of stuff.
Just to see what their narrative is.
Just to see what they're spinning and see what their spin is. But I don't use that. I used to have AP News on my phone. I got rid of it quite a few years ago because I'm like, dude, you can just see the bias in what you're reading. And a lot of people want to say like, oh, Reuters or, certain different, they're unbiased. They're central. Like, no, dude, they always lean a certain way. And it doesn't matter if you lean right or you lean left. It's a bias. So you're going to hear certain things from that side of the tracks,
And we're not going to get into this because we do need to start wrapping up, but there is such a thing as controlled opposition as well.
Yes.
And there is the people that are put out there. Like, for instance, if you were to look up Flat Earth, you would find the Flat Earth Society, which was a group that was purposefully formed so that they could list a bunch of bogus facts and information so that if anybody were to look up Flat Earth, that they would be like, this is nonsensical. So there is something with that as well. And so again, check your sources, be
wary because it's not just groups like that. A lot of times it's people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of big names out there that might, and I'm not saying that they're all controlled opposition because that's the other thing too, is you don't want to get like full on black pilled. Okay.
And that's what I wanted to talk about.
I know you wanted to talk about that before we were done. That's why I brought it up, but it's a good segue into that, is that you don't want to be full on black pilled. And I'm sure most of you are aware of like red pill, blue pill, whatever, from the Matrix. But black pilled, if you don't know what it is, basically just turns you into 100% like cynical, nihilistic, like worldview.
Nothing matters.
Like, oh my God, well, if this is how everything is, it's nothing matters. Why does it even matter? Like it's all going to
Why should I even wake up in the morning?
Right. And that is what they want. They want you to be either fearful or black pilled because black pill just means you have no hope.
No, right.
No hope, to where you why are you going to do anything? You're not going to fight back. If you have no hope, you are not going to fight back. You are not going to revolt against said government or the man or whoever.
And we're not asking anyone to go at it alone.
No, not at all.
I personally have experienced those moments and where I just feel like, what is even the point? Like I'm surrounded by chemicals. I'm surrounded by this, no matter how hard I try to stay pure in my mind, body, and spirit, there's something lurking around the corner. And what I continuously come to is that if I am focused on my highest good and the highest good of everyone around me, things start to improve. And we've talked about this in, I believe, our first episode, that your thoughts become things. What you think about, you bring about. And hopelessness is like it's a sickness almost, and it will cause you to be dormant and not creative. And so ultimately, like, we want to encourage you to go within and truly connect your head and your heart, and you will be guided. I remember briefly the first time, because of my dad always saying these things, and that the Vegas shooting where the lone gentleman acted who had no prior record whatsoever and then offed himself conveniently. I remember I didn't even look into any facts. I was at work and I heard about it. And I remember in my body, I knew that that was not truth. I knew it. And I hadn't even dug into all the things. Usually I feel something is untrue or true, and then it's verified. So when I say I don't like to dig into stuff like Zach does, I will feel it and he will confirm it with his facts. And
oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, so take what serves you, what resonates with you, and leave the rest. It doesn't, some of it, it's the moon landing, the JFK, those things they're not going to change the trajectory of your life, the way you live your life right now. It's just an awareness to know that things are not always as they seem, and the things going on are manipulated to keep us in a lower vibration.
It will change the way that you move, the way that you move about this world, and the way that you move about your life, because some of these things have an effect. Maybe a trickle-down effect, but a trickle-down effect, especially in an economic, sense or something like that. But just so I don't forget, yes, to go along with what you just said about taking what's good, taking what you feel to be true and what resonates with you, and just let the rest go. That kind of ties into a lot of these, someone who might be considered, controlled opposition, whatever, 90% truth, 10% lie. So a lot of times these people or sources will have a lot of actual truth, and that's what's used to then like pull you in, and then they insert something that maybe isn't so true in there, but that's okay. You just have to use your intuition and the way you feel. And if you feel off about somebody, I mean, there's probably a reason why you feel that way. So
follow the niggle. If you feel that niggle, that something seems a little off, maybe it's just stay away from it. Don't invest your time in it. Let's move forward. Go read something that gives you value, that lifts you up, and ultimately connect to the creator so that you can be guided into what is for your utmost, the highest good. If someone brings something to you, don't immediately shut it down. The truth is out there. So if you have any questions, concerns, or like Zach said earlier, your own story, or you'd like to share how you came to the conclusion in a truth-seeking mission, feel free to email us. You can find that email at www.highlevel444.com. What's our actual email? Zach and
Jess at highlevel444.com.
There you go. Zach and Jess at highlevel444.com.
The link is on our website, though.
And share with us. We thank you so much for listening and growing with us and helping to raise the consciousness of the planet. If you can't find hope, borrow mine tonight.
I love that.
That's a lyric from Abel Hart.
Go listen to Abel Hart if you haven't. He's an awesome, awesome artist. Also, to add to that, please, you can also message us or DM us on our social media. We have social media available.
Follow our Facebook page.
We have Facebook and Instagram.
High Level Heretic.
Yep. Become a part of the heretic community. So we have an Instagram, we have a Facebook, we have a YouTube channel as well for people that like to listen to these on YouTube. Go follow, like stuff, pay it, if you want to get updates and everything on us, you can either join our email list on our website, highlevel444.com, or you can just follow us on our social media, get notifications and such for upcoming episodes. We also have a special, every week we're going to be doing something called Wisdom Wednesday, where we just have a few little words of wisdom, a few little pearls that we give out every week. And so, go check all that stuff out. If you'll do us a big favor, like and follow, it only helps us
and
out.
Share
our episodes, share our little whatevers. So check that out.
Before we go, I'd like to read another excerpt from Tom Canavan's book, which will be available on Amazon soon, and all of the profits will go to my bonus mom, his widow. just FYI. And he says, what is the answer? Some might look to another person for this answer, either a great speaker or even a teacher or a guru, which if they were so great, they would tell you, you are the answer. The answer is found within you. It is like ragu sauce. It's all in there. The kingdom of heaven is in you. It is a state of mind, consciousness. You have the power to change your life. You have always had the power. The goal of the church and the beast, the government, has always been to hide this fact from you. We all create something, some unconsciously, some more consciously. The goal is to create consciously, better yet, co-create consciously. You have the power to change your life in the world. Put your hand on the steering wheel.
As always, today's episode has been brought to you by High Level Design Salon and Barbershop, where we turn the mundane into magic. And if you would like to find more information on how to book with us, pricing, availability, all that kind of stuff, how to contact us, just go to our website, highlevel444.com. All of that information is listed there. We hope to meet you someday soon. Until next time, we leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. May the Force be with you.
And also with you.
High Level Hairesy.